What's going on, good people? John Hendricks here alongside Ross Jackson for another episode of Second and Saints. Thank you so much for tuning in. Ross, my man, how's things going? It's a fine Friday. Those people don't know, obviously, but it's a fine Friday. How's things going, my man?
I'm doing great, man. Doing great. Excited to see how this whole storyline plays out this weekend. Can't wait to see this one. It's been a fun week. How you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing great. Just another week. The weather's starting to get a little bit better around here, so this is like my time to shine and stuff like that. Not as hot, so I'll take that anytime. And look, when we were in KC, it got like really cold too. So
Yeah,
like I
for
wasn't
real.
expecting that. But at any rate,
I was
yes,
out there
you
doing a
mentioned-
live show after the game. Like,
Yes, you do. Yeah, it reminded me of, you remember a couple of years back when Pittsburgh, when it was like snowing on the field, and I remember doing something. I was like, oh man, this is crazy.
Yes.
But yeah, one of the few colder environments I think we'll have to brave this year. But man, you kind of hit it, like the excitement, right? Spencer Rattler making his first start, the rookie going up against Tampa. This is a huge game for New Orleans. Like, no matter who was playing quarterback, they needed to find a way to win. Like, this is where the rubber meets the road. I don't care who's starting. I don't care who's playing. The bottom line is this team needs to win, right? And I think the biggest thing is obviously talking about Spencer Rattler. We know the decision was made on Tuesday morning that he was going to be the starter. Obviously, Jake Hayner's disappointed. I think we could probably piece some of the stuff together about why they went to Spencer Rattler. But why did they go to Spencer Rattler over Jake Hayner? Let's start there.
Yeah, I think a big part of it really just kind of comes down to sort of the expansive skill set of Spencer Rattler, the ability to be able to mobilize a little bit more with him. Not that he's going to get out there and break 60-yard runs like Lamar Jackson or anything like that, but his ability to maybe be able to turn a 3rd and 4 into a 1st and 10 when everything else breaks down, I think is something that you value. He's got some experience doing design runs, RPOs, gives you a little bit of that back in the playbook as well, even without a Taysom Hill. So I think that like those things do kind of go a little bit of a long way. It's one thing when you're trying to retain a Derek Carr game plan in game, which is why Jake Hayner made sense as the backup quarterback in those situations. And it's another thing entirely when you have the ability to do, as Spencer Rattler told us, customizing the offense to fit the quarterback. And you've had a week here. Yes, it was technically a short week, but you still had Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You have a walkthrough on Saturday to customize the offense and give Spencer Rattler a game plan that I think ends up kind of working to his benefit and working to his individual skill set. So I think those things in particular end up being a big part of it. And then Dennis Allen highlighting sort of the maturity and humble nature of Spencer Rattler since showing up and the development that he's had ever since they kind of went through. So those are things that I pinpoint. What have you heard around the situation?
Yeah, look, I mean, I got to say, admittedly, I thought they were going to turn to Jake because, again, it's just how I put on the organization hat for a second. And that's kind of where I thought is that they were going to turn to Jake Hayner. And look, these guys are both competitive, right? Like, we know that it's somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose in this situation, right? But I think really when you look at Rattler's skill set, like you kind of mentioned, and even talking to guys like Clint Kubiak or just some of the players, like the fact is, and I think Clint Kubiak said this probably, and again, this is no disrespect or indication of the other quarterbacks, but he's like, we don't even have to dumb down the playbook. You know what I mean? Like that was one thing. Like they don't have to go to some type of vanilla style or vanilla scheme because they're changing a quarterback. They feel he's fully capable. They're basically telling him, look, hey, it doesn't matter if he makes a mistake. He's our guy. The team's going to rally around him. He's going to lead him. And look, I mean, I think that when you look at Rattler and even talking about going to the offseason, we talked to Shane Beamer, the South Carolina head coach, and Dal Loggins and stuff. This pro style type of offense does fit a Spencer Rattler, whereas Jake Hayner went from last year learning that offense to having to learn a new offense. And of course, we saw both of these guys in practices where Spencer Rattler had kind of like the more flashy moments, right? And Jake
Hmm.
Haener had some really good moments too. But when it came to preseason, Rattler kind of edged out. I thought Haener had some really strong practices and such. But
Hmm.
I just think this is a culmination where now you look at since that point, Rattler being on that show team going up against that defense, they said that's kind of where he's been standing out a lot more too. And it just seems to carry himself a lot better in terms of where he's at from day one to now, I guess you could say. And so, look, I think for him, it's just going in there and it's all about execution. We know that's going to be hard against that offensive line or with that offensive line the way it is right now. We know that they're banged up too, but I think Spencer Rattler probably does give them the best chance of winning this game. And look, I'm excited because of this prospect is at least now we get to see if there's a future, right? Like
Yep.
2 games is what he's going to presumably play right now. And we get to see if there's a future quarterback in the building.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought up the show team because if you really look at it, he's had to emulate Dak Prescott. He's had to emulate Jalen Hurts. He's had to emulate Patrick Mahomes. Not bad quarterbacks to have to emulate in those situations, right? And be able to show a little bit of what it is that you do. No disrespect to Kirk Cousins, but those three guys in
Yeah.
particular. I'm not going to throw Bryce Young in the conversation, but those three guys in particular, like the need to be able to move around, to be able to kind of do some of the things that they do in those offenses. I'm sure Clint Kubiak was looking at him operating that. If he was impressive, as they say in those show teams, he's looking at that going, man, I want that in my offense. You know what I mean? And so I
Yeah.
think that there's like something there too, in terms of their ability to be able to kind of replicate some of those things they saw Spencer Rattler do, introduce that to this offense, continue to expand it in a way that's significant and unique. And I think that's something to really watch out for in this game is that New Orleans now gets the opportunity to kind of throw a little bit of a curveball into the situation in terms of what the offense looks like, versus what it has looked like under Derek Carr. Doesn't mean you have to change everything widely. They're still going to run everything, like you mentioned. They're not planning on dumbing the offense down, but instead, what you're really looking at is, okay, here's the offense, and also here are some things that we know that you can also do. And then so you add some of those pieces to the offense to help him be comfortable. I think all that makes sense in terms of giving him this opportunity. The one thing that I think is really important, John, is that Spencer Rattler gets this game and the Thursday night game against Denver. I think if you give him this game and then you turn around and you give Jake Haener that next game, you're right now you're in a battle to try to create consistency amidst inconsistency, like when you lose a starting quarterback. And so if you shuffle in another quarterback at that time, it's only going to make things worse. It's only going to make things tougher. And so you might as well, whoever it is that you were picking for this game needs to be the guy for the next game, assuming that Derek Carr isn't ready to go.
Yeah, and look, they get a mini bye after that short week, and so
Mm-hmm.
after that, what is it? At the end of the month, they play at Los Angeles, and then they got at Carolina. So, look, I think after this type of rest, it wouldn't surprise me that Derek at least would be in a position where he probably could return. And look,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of varying opinions on here, right? Like I know they had this big old thing where I just to get on this Spencer Rattler tangent, Dennis Allen saying, look, we've talked to personnel, we've talked to the front office, we've talked to a whole bunch of the coaches and all that. But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, it was his decision to go with Spencer Rattler. I kind of buy that, right? Like, I believe
Mm-hmm.
so. I mean, this is his team, but he's also made it clear that when Derek is healthy, he's going to be the starter. So let's play the hypothetical. Let's just say Spencer Rattler gets them 2 wins in this short week and he balls out. Is there going to be a controversy for who starts at quarterback?
I'm inclined to say no, just because what it is that this team wants to do. They want Derek Carr as their quarterback, but also it depends. Like, what's the definition of ball out? You know what I mean? Like, if he goes out there and
Yeah.
he throws for 500 yards in both games and 4 or more touchdowns in both games, then sure, yeah, you have the conversation about like, okay, do you really want to go back to Derek Carr? Or do you want to continue to ride the hot hand and see what happens here? New Orleans has shown the propensity to do exactly that. They did it with Andy Dalton. I don't know if you would call that a hot hand decision, but they did that with Andy Dalton.
Stable.
Um, yeah, right. Yeah, something like that. And everything. And so like they've done this kind of thing before, and there wasn't, $140 million or whatever as a part of the conversation like there is here. But I think you have to listen to what you get out of a Spencer Rattler and believe what you see. But then, if he leads them to 2-0, in a Teddy Bridgewater fashion, to where he's throwing like a couple touchdowns here and there, but mostly is barely exceeding 200 passing yards and things like that, then I think your decision is obvious that you go back to Derek Carr when you get started, or when he's healthy and ready to go. So I think that's the thing. And then what that does, though, is that makes the conversation very interesting as the season wanes on and in the offseason. I think that's where these conversations, the quarterback position, become really, really interesting. If Spencer Rattler leads you to a 2-0 kind of gap here in between the absence of Derek Carr, and does so in impressive fashion, but not like, Dennis Allen, I'm so excited about this, I got to call Spencer Rattler's parents to tell them how excited I am about it, kind of performance. Like, that's for me, like, that's kind of the dividing, not literally the dividing line about whether or not Dennis Allen calls Spencer Rattler's parents, but in terms of like, what's the performance that leads that 2-0, I think is a larger conversation. But I think outside of something completely out of this world, in terms of performance, like Jaden Daniels level performance in his rookie season, you're probably going right back to Derek Carr when he's healthy. And then maybe you have a more intriguing conversation going on in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree. I mean, we've sat here and talked about, the fact that, Dennis Allen, for all intents and purposes, should be back next year, and Derek Carr is his quarterback. I mean, that kind of that's open and shut case for me. Like, I understand it, like I get it, because the moment Derek would come back in and mess up if Spencer Rattler plays well, then everybody's going to be like, well, that's why he should have went with Spencer. And look, I think for success on him, Spencer, I told you, I guess I went pretty bold. I think 250 to 275 yards for him, 2 touchdowns and a pick, and maybe like 20 to 25 completions. That's what I kind of picture as a really good day for Spencer Rattler. I don't think it's 350. I don't think it's something crazy where he throws 3 or 4 touchdown passes. I expect him to make mistakes, but they're going to ride through with all the mistakes if he does make mistakes, or when he does make mistakes. And so, look, this is Dennis Allen's team. This is Derek Carr is his quarterback. Like, I mean, again, in the offseason, I could see maybe having that conversation. Maybe there's some pressure on, but it depends on where the Saints go from here. Because if they're worse off than where they started, before Spencer Rattler, then it seems like it's no brainer. But, so many things have to go right for this team over the next 2 games. Like their offensive line, which is patched up again, and hurt. Lucas Patrick's going to be a game time decision. Connor McGovern looked like he was a little bit hobbled a little bit out there today. And right now it looks like Saldivar is going to play left guard. He got pulled from the game. They're going to go Landon again, which, again, we're really not talking a lot about Trevor Penning. I think he's doing pretty good. And same thing with Taliesin Fuanga. This has been a harder thing for the interior to overcome, but and Cesar Ruiz is not ready, but that's part of it. You got to get the run game going. We need to get some more weapons involved. Like, just get some invigoration of some things, something different, because what's been happening and the fact that they got outplayed and outcoached on Monday Night Football against the Chiefs is just unsettling. And you got to just let your playmakers play. I feel like this is pretty straightforward. I have no doubts that Spencer Rattler can lead some really good drives with this first team. I just worry about the protection, and I worry about the run game. But look what Kirk Cousins did to him, on Thursday Night Football. He threw for over 500 yards and all those explosive plays the Bucs gave up.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things that you're looking for here. I would be surprised if Spencer Rattler throws 30 or more times in this game. Like, I think that's something that they're going to want to keep down, not because of anything about Spencer Rattler, but like it's a rookie quarterback. Like, you're trying not to put the game on his shoulders. And so you have to get the run game going, and your defense has to be able to stand tall in the fourth quarter. The Saints defense has only given up 1 touchdown in the first half. They've given up 4 touchdowns in the second half, 3 of them in the fourth quarter. And so I think like that's the place where you want to see the defense stand a little bit taller. That way, Spencer Rattler at the end of the game doesn't have to go out there and try to play some hero ball or anything like that. They can keep their run game going for 60 minutes. And I think that's what ends up helping you quite a bit in this matchup. And so, yeah, I think that like that's going to be such a big thing. I also think that like when you look at kind of the Spencer Rattler conversation right now in terms of, like what does everything look like in the future, that thing that kind of works in Dennis Allen's benefit in a way is that, let's say that Spencer Rattler looks great these 2 games, but not great enough to usurp a Derek Carr, which again would take a pretty, special performance for you to really get to that point. Let's say that happens. Dennis Allen then gets to turn around this offseason and say, well, I had my bridge quarterback in Derek Carr, but now I've got my young quarterback in Spencer Rattler. And it buys them more time potentially in that way. And that's a guy that Clint Kubiak drafted and all these other, or that Clint Kubiak was a part of the offensive staff that helped to draft him along with the college scouting staff and all those other pieces. I think that's going to be a big talking point by the time you get to the end of the season. If Spencer Rattler ends up having a couple of great games here and maybe gets another opportunity later on in the season, we'll see what happens. I think that becomes a really important piece of what the offseason puzzle looks like, because John, I know you and I have had this conversation before. I think we've both been told this, but the Saints, with restructuring Derek Carr, don't feel like they're stuck in a situation with Derek Carr to where they couldn't move on from him if they wanted to over the course of the offseason. They could still do that. And so that's why I think that it's really that timeline that becomes a lot more kind of intriguing when it comes to the Spencer Rattler performance and all those other things. All right. Let me get off my soapbox about Spencer Rattler and quarterback conversations. Next up, we're going to take a look at the New Orleans Saints defense, as well as the weapons around Spencer Rattler. Who are the people outside of Spencer Rattler that have to lead to a win? We're going to dive into all of that here as we continue on Second and Saints.
Hey, folks, John Hendricks here from Second and Saints. Look, we know it's the greatest time of the year again. Football's back, and it's here to stay until February. Look, over 1 million fans across 33 states got in a game last year by making picks on Underdog. Win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on your favorite player's stats, whether it's touchdowns, passing yards, and much more. Who doesn't like apps? And Underdog has a real easy app to use. But if you're like me, I like to use a website too. So when I want to look at more stats for a game or look at splits for Alvin Kamara, this is a good site for us to go check all of that information out. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward, and signing up is even easier. Just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com, sign up with promo code SecondSaints, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code SecondSaints to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. Must be 18 or older, 19 and older in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 and older in Colorado for some games, 21 and older in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 HOPE line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. I love Underdog because it's so easy to use and it's so fast to get started and play. Sign up process is really smooth and they have a slick mobile app. So what are you waiting for? Go check out Underdog today. Use that code SecondSaints and we'll see you in the game. Thanks for sticking with us through all that fun stuff and welcome back to the Second and Saints. Ross, we were kind of talking about the weapons before we did the break. And look, there's obviously some concerns there. We talked about injuries. No Taysom Hill again with the fractured ribs. Rashid Shaheed, he has a hip injury. He was limited in practice, as was Alvin Kamara, limited in practice with a hand injury as a new one, in addition to what he's dealing with already. But look, it goes beyond the big three of Kamara, Shaheed, and Olave that need to really step up a little bit. I like the fact that Spencer Rattler talked about Mason Tipton. I think that Foster Moreau and Juwan Johnson need to get a little bit more involved, and maybe we start seeing some Dallin Holker, because as well as I did in the in training camp and stuff, he was like a big target of Rattlers, as was Mason Tipton. So again, it depends if he plays right a lot because he's only getting a handful of snaps, but that run game's got to get going. And we mentioned it too. They're not using Jamal Williams a lot. I expect him to be more of a blitz guy, but maybe it's time to get Jordan Mims involved a little bit. Like, you got to do something different to inject some life into this offense.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I don't know that Kendre Miller is going to be ready yet in this game either. I think you're on the same page there. It's tough, man. Like, when you miss all a training camp and you go about 70 plus days without practicing, like, you got to get up to conditioning. You got to get up to the playbook. Dennis Allen telling us today that Kendre Miller is like progressing very well in that, like every day, taking steps forward with it. That sounds like a guy that's still very much in the process, not a guy that's ready to play this weekend, unless there's some big gamesmanship decision going on in this, but I kind of doubt it. We have to remember too that Kendre Miller at TCU ran a lot of inside zone, didn't run a lot of outside zone, wide zone type systems. So this is entirely new to him, but he's a smart kid. Like, he'll get it. So we'll see when he gets back out onto the field, but I don't think that's going to be this weekend. One of the things that's been so interesting, John, is you look at week 1 where it was a low production game for Chris Olave, low target game for Chris Olave, let me say it that way. And week 5 against Kansas City, low production game against the Kansas City Chiefs, low target game against Kansas City Chiefs. But in both those games, tight ends scoring touchdowns, tight ends catching multiple catches. Then you look at weeks 2, 3, and 4, which were all games in which Chris Olave went over 80 receiving yards, barely any production or opportunities for the tight ends. The Saints have had trouble keeping their tight ends and their receivers involved in the same game. That has been a big issue for them so far, or not a big issue, but it's been whatever reason, for whatever number of reasons, that has been something that hasn't been consistent throughout this season. So I'm very curious to see if this is the game. Be interesting if it is Spencer Rattler in that, with it being Spencer Rattler in that case, but very curious to see if this is the game where the Saints can both get Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, as well as their tight ends, more involved in this matchup. And I'm curious too, because the other player that we haven't mentioned yet that Rattler had a really good connection with, particularly over the course of like mini camp, like rookie mini camps, OTAs and stuff, was fellow rookie wide receiver Bub Means. Curious to see if maybe this is a game where we get to see a little bit more Bud Means as well, because of his amount of reps that he has taken with Spencer Rattler over the course of the offseason, regular season, practices, all that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be in sync, right? Like, I mean, that's the big thing here. And look, I mean, he said it as much as saying that, he hasn't had obviously a ton of reps with the first team guys. And look, I think that chemistry will come in time, but we know that Bub Means was a big target of his, and Mason Tipton. Of course, they should be active in this game too. But look, they got to figure out a way to get him settled in. That's kind of the biggest thing. And he even said as much, like, get settled in, get over the nerves, just play your brand of football. I expect the tight ends to be a big part of the game, right? Like, I just think that that's an easy way to get some confidence built for Spencer Rattler is get Juwan involved early, maybe get a couple of things like, and maybe not necessarily Foster, but just lean on Juwan Johnson a good bit here to get open, to be able to do some things, maybe some short stuff to Alvin, get a screen game going. I know we really haven't seen that much lately. I mean,
True.
offensive line, we understand, right? But
Yeah,
I
makes
think it's
sense.
time to bring back some of the elements that you saw within the first 2 weeks. And look, again, given how much explosive plays the Bucs just gave up, I think there is going to be some downfield stuff. And they love Mason Tipton. I think that he can get behind this defense. Even with that, I think they're going to take some shots. Like, I don't think they're going to put some type of like seatbelt or anything on Spencer Rattler. I think like he said today, he's going to cut it loose, right? And I expect him to come out and throw the ball. I don't expect him to be like, all right, well, let's just do this balanced run attack or anything like that. But, for him, it's just getting settled in and then let him cook, right? Like, I just think so. And I think he has the discipline. And I remember something he said in training camp about making mistakes, about having the short-term memory, like just as quickly as he can put it past him, like it's on to the next play. And I know people always say that, but for a quarterback of his stature and magnitude, it's super important that he does that in this particular game.
Yep. So what I'm hearing, John, is play action deep shot, first play of the game, first offensive rep.
I mean, I called the Foster touchdown the other week and
That's right.
night. So I don't know if it's first play, but look, I think within the first series, I think you got to test it, right? Like, I think you should. I don't know if it's Mason on a go route or something, but I think you need to test him and go deep and say, okay, we're not just going to do some sort of game plan. And of course, first 15 plays are scripted and all that typical stuff. But I think you got to air it out a little bit. Don't hesitate. And if it's there, great. And if it's not there and he throws a pick, it'll be okay, because the Saints defense needs to also elevate itself too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the story of this game on the offensive side of the football, the story of this game becomes not just about Spencer Rattler's performance as a whole. I think more finite than that. It becomes about his ability to be able to manage adversity and navigate adversity. I think you made reference to it earlier today that like not everything's going to go great. Like eventually something's going to go wrong. That's consistent with the game of football as a whole, but it's also consistent with a rookie quarterback, right? And can that rookie quarterback do, as you mentioned, have that short-term memory and be able to come back and do it? I think back to, and just to be clear too, the idea of something going wrong doesn't have to be catastrophic. You think back to that Arizona game on that final drive where he led to the field goal. He took 2 shots down that right sideline to Samson Nakua on the comeback, the first of which he threw too far outside, the second of which became the key completion that led to the 37-yard field goal by Charlie Smith to win the game. And so that is an example of something not going right or something going wrong and being able to come back and navigate that adversity. It doesn't mean it has to be anything catastrophic.
Right. And look, we're going to find out really quickly. I'm excited to see Spencer Rattler in action, but more importantly, I just want to see this team like get back into the win column,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
losing 3 straight the way they have, like I understand the Philly game. I kind of understand the Falcons game, but this Chiefs game was kind of like, I don't want to sit here and say it was rock bottom, but in a way like it felt like, okay, now we're back down to reality and earth. Like this is the time where it's like, okay, now we got to go back to the drawing board, figure some
Yeah.
things
Trying to
out.
build back.
And look, defensively, they're going to have some things to worry about, right? Like, Pete Werner is out with a hamstring injury. So is Will Harris. Dennis said he was a candidate for IR, but I don't know if we're at that point just yet. I know he told me that he's trying to get back as quick as he can there. So it's potentially Jonathan Abrams starting again, which he did really well against Tampa last year in that game with Tyron. And then you got Willie Gay Jr., who 2 days now, full participant in practice. He doesn't have an injury game designation for somebody who had a procedure on his hand. Like, that's pretty impressive. So getting him back would be a really big boost for this team as well. But again, it's Baker Mayfield. They're not going to have Rachaad White. It's going to be Irving. It's going to be carrying the load there for him. And, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, like it's all the familiar faces. But I think, again, with Baker Mayfield, it starts with, can you disrupt him in the pocket? Can you get the pass rush going? And that's been the biggest thing. And Dennis Allen, 2 weeks in a row, has defended the pass rush and said, I thought they're better than what he originally thought. Do you kind of agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I think that there's times where it's there. I think the biggest thing with the pass rush is that like the pressure is there. Like the Saints are way, way, way above where they were pressure wise last year. Going into the game against Kansas City, Carl Granderson and Chase Young so far had combined for more pressures than the entire New Orleans Saints defense in its first 4 games in 2023 on their own. And so the pressure is absolutely there. The concern has been, again, finishing plays at the quarterback, and something you can consider in that situation, because I don't want to excuse it, right? Like it's still big time an issue and you got to get it figured out eventually. We've been talking about this for years now. And so you have to get it figured out eventually, but we should consider that it was, Jalen Hurts is a part of that equation. Patrick Mahomes, the absolute magician, is a part of that equation. So, there's a holistic way to look at this as opposed to just like an accusatory way of looking at it. And so I do think that like that needs to be taken into consideration. But I do think that the pass rush is better than it had been over the course of, the last few years, just in terms of actually generating a pass rush. The Saints right now sit with a total of 103 pressures on the season so far, which it's going to take me a little while, but I can figure out how long it takes them to get there, how long it took them to get there last year. But I can promise you it took more than 5 games to get to 103 pressures last year, because they were not a team that was consistent in driving pressures last season.
Yeah, and for those who have short-term memory, remember last year, like that was all the players like Cam were asked in the locker room for the first like 5 or 6 weeks is, and Dennis Allen, like they're not getting pressure, they're not getting home, they're not finishing the plays. And I'm with you. I think Carl and obviously Chase Young is getting there a lot more. And we saw Cam even getting after it against Patrick Mahomes, Brian Brzee, I think, from the interior, and Colin Saunders playing the way he did. Like if they can just get some stability and finish plays, I feel much better. I think this is a game where you can get a little bit more success on Baker and just play kind of not necessarily what you did last year, but taking some of that into account of how much they absolutely shut Tampa down. And a lot of it began with that pass rush. And you remember when they got the lead, how much they put the clamps down. They were able to put their third down packages in. They were getting their sub rush. They were doing all the things that just made his day miserable. I mean, they couldn't even get back into the game.
Yeah, that was a huge piece for them, was their ability to be able to get that pressure on Baker. And you know how it is when it comes to Baker, like that's the whole thing. Like that's
Yeah.
what you're trying to do. You're trying to get that pressure on him. You're trying to disrupt him, and you're trying to put him in those situations where maybe he's feeling a little bit panicked, or his clock is being a little rushed, or whatever it might be. All of those things end up being the things that have kind of the best impact. So this is a game where whether it's pressure or sacks, it's going to be of value to get to or after Baker Mayfield. Even this season, Baker right now completing only 53.9% of his passes with an 86.7 passer rating, NFL passer rating under pressure. Compare that to what has been a 74.6% completion percentage and 117.7 passer rating when he's kept clean. It has an impact to get after him. And that's what you got to do. And in fact, the funny thing though, is that he's sitting with an 11-2 touchdown to interception ratio. Both of his interceptions have been while kept clean. So that part is pretty interesting. But turnover worthy throws, forcing him into those situations, all that kind of stuff, getting the pressure on him is going to help you do that.
Yeah. And not only that, but something that was really tough against the Chiefs. Dennis Allen said space tackling is part of one of the things he brought up today, and just the way they're able to hit the open field. And like, you remember what Chiefs were doing? They were dinking and dunking. They were getting the ground game going, and they were just doing the things that just plagued the Saints. I mean, it was just a textbook way of just basically being able to exploit them in a lot of ways. And so I hope they can limit some of the explosives. Again, I think getting Willie Gay Jr. back, assuming he is going to play, I think he's going to be active. I just don't know how much he's going to play, but I think that's going to help a little bit there. And then on the back end, instead of a guy like Jonathan Abram going in cold, he's going to start. And so now he gets to start from, the very beginning and such. And look, the corners, I know people are making a big deal about the Paulson Adebo stuff, and I'm pretty sure you asked Joe Woods the question about the PI and stuff. Kind of share some of the insights about that and why they're not necessarily worried that that's something that keeps happening.
Yeah, biggest thing that they're looking at is like, what's the technique in the situation? I mean, one of the things that Joe Wood said was like, look, when you have a defensive pass interference penalty against the fastest player in NFL history, that might be something that the coaching staff looks at and goes, you did what you had to do. You know what I mean? Right. They love the way that Paulson Adebo plays. They love the physicality. They don't want him to lose that. And so this is actually, what's funny is the conversation between Paulson Adebo and his pass interference penalties feels a lot like the conversation that was going on about Trevor Penning and his extracurricular activities, right? It's where it's like, you don't want him to lose the aggression, but you want him to tailor it back just a little bit to keep the laundry off the field. And so I think you have to find that balance. But I will say this, like, Paulson Adebo is immensely confident in his abilities. And so he'll draw that flag, but then he'll come right back the next play and take the ball back or get a pass breakup or anything like that. That's one of the reasons why you're not going to see the New Orleans Saints overreact to Paulson Adebo's pass interference penalties. And look, the most detrimental one that he's had so far was without a doubt the 30-yard pass interference penalty against the Atlanta Falcons that put them immediately in field goal range for Young Ku's longest field goal of his career and the longest field goal ever kicked and made in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Like, that's the reality of that situation. And so I don't think that the Saints are going to overplay this or going to overreact rather to the Paulson Adebo pass interference penalties or anything like that. They love the way that he plays the game, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, and look, I think, I know people said, well, it's time to roll in Kool-Aid and stuff. Like, just give it a little bit of grace there. Like, I just think that he's still playing at a high level, and I don't think the pass interference penalties are just indicative of how he's playing, right? We knew you shouldn't be surprised that he's a physical style corner. He's always been a physical style corner. He's just getting called, and of course we know how the first several weeks of the NFL goes, that they call things a little bit more close to the vest in some aspects, I guess.
It's fair to say.
But it's just, again, I didn't like the penalty against the Falcons, of course, but the one against the Chiefs, I mean, shoot, you're right. Xavier Worthy's super, super, super fast. And, when you're able to stay stride for stride, I think that's good. And then obviously on the other side, you got Marshawn and Mike Evans thing. And I thought it was interesting, Mike Evans was talking about how he kind of needs to have a cooler head, I guess, if you will. So, I don't say it verbatim.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, I mean, of course, these are two competitors going up at each other. And then look, this is going to be the game I think Marshawn's going to be tested because before that, like nobody's throwing at Marshawn. And so I'm
At
really
all.
excited to see that. And it'll be good. And so this team's just gotta again find a way to win.
Yeah.
How do you see this one playing out? And of
Real
course,
quick, I
anything
want
if you
to
want to add on Marshawn for sure.
Yeah. I want to add on about Paulson too, because I was just looking it up real quick. Not only is Paulson leading like the team in defensive pass interference penalties and defensive holding penalties and stuff like that, but he's also leading. He's tied for the league lead with interceptions with 2, which is a bunch of players tied at 2. But he's also second in the NFL with pass breakups, according to Pro Football Focus, with 7, and he's number 1 in the NFL with forced incompletions with 10, all by himself in that metric, which is a metric that he led the NFL in last year as well. And he's only allowing a 68 passer rating when targeted too. So I say that not to excuse the defensive pass interference penalties, but just to kind of show that like, it's one thing if you're getting called for the defensive pass interference penalties and you're giving up, you're not making those kinds of plays. It's a different thing when you're giving up those penalties every now and then, and you're still making those plays. So I just wanted to highlight that real quick too.
Yeah, it's a great call.
Yeah, and then on the Marshawn side, I want to look exactly how many times he's been targeted so far this season, according to Pro Football Focus. He's been targeted 9 times so far this season, which is insane. Because if you compare that to Paulson Adebo, who's been targeted 46 times, John, that's an insane split. 46 times for Paulson, 33 targets so far for Alontae Taylor, 9 for Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah, I'm going to check my notes and say that's a pretty big gap there.
That's a pretty big gap. That's a pretty good back.
That's good stuff. And Ross Jackson coming in with the knowledge that people need to understand and, hear about, right?
That PFF, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what? It's some people it's convenient when it's good, and some people need to get a little bit more behind the scenes look and stuff. So this game, obviously the Superdome, they got 2 in the Superdome. This is a big one. Like I said, it's a division game. So obviously you want to keep pace with Atlanta, I guess you could say, and you don't want to get behind the 8 ball again with Tampa and then have to play catch up here. But again, there are some factors that the Saints need to work out. And I guess the biggest thing is I don't know what team's going to show up. Like, I feel like this is going to be the right team that shows up this week, but I kind of want to see it, right? Like, you got a rookie starting, the defense, did they figure everything out in a week, or a short week and stuff? How do you see this one playing out, and who are you taking?
No idea. Absolutely no idea. I have no idea what to expect from this game. And to me, that's awesome. Like, I love a game. I love being able to go in and cover a game. It's like going in and watching a movie that you're pretty sure you're going to love, but you don't really know a lot about it. That's how I feel about this matchup. I think that it all comes down to what we talked about earlier. In particular, Spencer Rattler's ability to manage adversity, right? Not sink when he, dunks his head underwater a little bit. He's able to come back up. Great. The Saints' ability to run the football and the defense's ability to hold on to a late lead if they have one, or at least keep it close, right? Because they were 16-13 at the end of the game in the fourth quarter last week. But then, as Joe Woods mentioned, like, you got some missed tackles, and the Saints missed 13 tackles in that game up against Kansas City. So I think that that's just one of those things that you got to look at. If those things can all come together, then I think New Orleans is a good chance here. But if they don't, then they lose. Like, it's that simple, because those are pretty core tenets to winning a football game. So I think that that's the thing that I'm looking for. It's the elements of what it takes to get a win that I'm waiting to see, more than it is me waiting to see a result, because I think that there's going to be a much bigger story to tell by the end of week 6 for the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I know when I did my game predictions back in May, I gave this game a loss for the Saints, and I didn't expect them. Like, we're on course for the schedule right now. Like, I only think I messed up. English is hard sometimes. Was the Dallas and Atlanta games. I flip-flopped those. But,
Same for me.
That's the only thing. And then so I gave him a loss originally on this one because Tampa plays him really hard in the Superdome. The Saints have got to come out here, and I don't want to say they have to play a perfect game, but I'm with you. I don't know what to expect. I can go out on a limb and tell you that I think this is a 1-score game. I think this is coming down to a close to a final possession as it can get. I'm going to take New Orleans again. I can't pick against them yet. Right. Like I knew I was tempted to last week against Kansas City. Of course you did. And you're right, unfortunately. But I just think I got to take New Orleans in this one. I'm thinking more like a 27-24, 28-24. That's kind of where I'm looking at leaning. I think it's going to be pretty close. I don't think the Saints can totally shut down the Bucs. I think there's still going to be some struggles here, but I think Spencer Rattler can get it done enough to where the Saints are going to be able to win this game. And, against the Broncos, that means they'll probably just lose on a short week, but who knows? They got to get this
Never
game.
know.
They need this game.
Yeah.
They need this
game. That's exactly right. And look, Denver's playing on a short week too next week. So, they're both going to be in the same boat. So we'll see which way it goes. But man, I'll tell you, getting a win this week and look, sometimes you get that 1 game bump, right? When it comes to that, change at quarterback, or maybe the Jets get it this week with the firing of Robert Saleh and all these other things. Like you get that 1 game bump when there's this big momentum shift in your locker room. Maybe New Orleans gets that. I don't know. But I think for me, this one comes down to navigating the adversity. If the Saints can do that, then they'll win.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I mean, they're both coming off division games, so they're going to be probably pretty battered and bruised on this one. But and obviously, Sean Payton coming to town, Drew Sting stuff is going to be a big highlight there. It's going to be must.
Well, anytime Drew's in the building, they lose.
Yeah, so that's true. Right.
They got
that's
fix
why they
it.
Definitely going to win.
Yeah, that's the thing. They got to fix that Thursday night, man. Like when he's getting inducted, like all this kind of stuff. Like this ain't the time. There's company. Like don't embarrass me in front of company is what Drew needs to tell them.
This Allen's 1-6 in prime time now too, so that'll be a nice little talking point. So they got to figure out and find a way, and we'll be there obviously covering the game. Definitely check out all the work at Locked On and LouisianaSports.net and Saints News Network. Ross, anything cool that is cooking right now for you on either platform?
Working on
I'm sure there is, but.
Yeah. Over at LouisianaSports.net, I'm working on a piece that is the anatomy of a game-winning drive, and I'm really excited about it because I got some really good insight from folks on that. So really excited about doing that. And then I got a couple of other things that are coming this weekend on like culture and all these other things because, man, I don't know about you, John, but like being in the locker room the past couple of days has not felt different than it did week 1, after week 1, anything like that. Like this locker room feels very even keeled down the middle. They're not subscribing to any of the peaks or any of the valleys, it feels like. And I think that that's an important and positive note around this team. What about you?
Yeah, look, I agree with you in the locker room. I just still feel like it's just they're part, I don't want to say cruise control, but like they got it together, right? And I know that they know they're better than what they should be. And I think that's going to help keep them going here. Right now I'm working on a Rattler editorial. So that's kind of where I'm working on. And so you just put everything together on him and some other things. So I'm going to have that come out. And of course, all the normal coverage, your betting advice, your fantasy advice. This is going to be a fascinating week for fantasy football. So tune in to Saints News Network on Sports Illustrated for all that fun stuff. But we will have our post-game show on Sunday. And boy, I can't wait because it's going to be a really interesting one regardless of what happens, right? I think it's just going to be something we're either going to be having a lot of fun or we're going to be like, man, this is about what we maybe thought it could.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario. Hopefully they come away with a win. But at any rate, on behalf of Ross Jackson, John Hendricks for Second and Saints, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe button. You guys, again, community's been fantastic. Continue to spread the word, do all that fun stuff, and we just will continue to pay it forward, guys. So can't say enough good things about the support you guys have given us, and we just let us know what else we can do to make sure that you get the coverage that you deserve when it comes to this team. So guys, that'll do it for us. Again, tune in post game. We'll have live coverage, all that fun stuff. But until then, enjoy and have a good weekend and be good people. That's it. Have a good one.
Love you.